to them. But it strikes me that the victims, aside from places like law enforcement and the emergency department, are largely out of sight. And so whereas criminals are often in sight, we see them in being arrested, we see them in court, but we often don't see the victims. And I'm wondering if would be a way to introduce up close and personal the consequences of crime to the people making the decisions about who to protect.
We try to do that. We try to do that when we're, through our committee process, we try to bring in people who have been victimized by certain circumstances. That's certainly part of it, and you're on the mark when it comes to visibility and the way we manipulate emotion, right? Emotion is very powerful in decision making, and creating that emotion is something that we on the law enforcement side need to be much better at. We're not that good because we believe that we're just trying to carry out a very, very difficult task, and that's trying to bring people to accountability. And there have been some exercised misjudgments and some poor examples of doing that. And those are to never be tolerated, but in the same right, it can't be defining the entire profession. And I think that the public is finally starting to realize the value of law enforcement. And I'm thankful for that, because I think we went through a very toxic period. But I believe that things are, because everybody, I don't care what your political perspective is, everybody wants to feel safe, everyone. And we should work from that common perspective towards crafting more meaningful public safety policy. Because right now, victims really aren't a very strong part of the equation. And I'm working very, very vigilantly, because I have a strong connection through the tragedies that I have witnessed from poor choices. And I hope to be a tempering influence based on those experiences.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that. Mr. Lackey, I did want to ask a question. I'd answer my phone. Could you elaborate on the bill that was passed for the no bail? I've heard about it, but I'm not exactly sure what the no bail means and how different it is to where it was before.
Well, the particular bill that I'm talking about that almost made it, basically, it wasn't a complete zero bail, but it was a huge step towards getting there, because what it would have done was it would have eliminated the accountability piece for the bail industry, and would have allowed them to now no longer remain competitive based on the amount of money that they would have been afforded to charge individuals. And so what would have happened is, and it's going to come back, I promise you. I mean, when you're only 2 votes away from success, it's definitely going to come back. And this is an issue that's not disappearing. And what we need to understand is that bail is a part of our Constitution, by the way. And, but a more fair and equitable way to implement bail is definitely in demand. And I'm all for trying to get, first of all, a more uniform system throughout the entire state, because that is not in place. And that's something that we desperately need, and we need to make sure that it's based on public safety circumstances and not based on some other arbitrary measure, which is what's being proposed.
So the bill that was proposed was just to make bail easier or cheaper?
Both, yes, and less consequential. And that's the simple explanation. It's fairly complex, the discussion piece and all the points, but that's the way it happens. It starts in a certain, it looks like it has a sense of reason when it's the underpinnings and it's the non-heralded pieces of that legislation and consequences that are devastating.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Assemblyman Leckie, as far as the victims and having their voices heard, what do you want to see from the commission here to help bring those voices forward? Because as you said, you know, they are the least being heard right now. Is this the arena we should be inviting them to? Contact your office? What would be the best way? What would you like to see from us to help improve?
No, the fact that you're even here as a body speaks loudly, and I'm very, very proud of Lancaster for recognizing the issue needs to be vetted, right? And all sides of consideration need to be openly discussed and not dismissed, right? We're living in a society where if you disagree with somebody, you want to dismiss them. And that is so hurtful, and that's so counterproductive to democracy. What we need to do is not hate those who disagree with us, but to actually meaningful have discussion and be persuasive through the power of persuasion, that the common goal that we all want, which is to feel safe, needs to be the focus. And the way we get there comes as a collaborative effort and through discussion and through dialogue. So what you're doing here is hugely meaningful, and I wished it would happen in every community, but it does not. And a lot of people just rely on government, and I think that that is not our best process. So what you're doing here is allowing people to come forward to speak, to express their opinions, and hopefully not be dismissed, and hopefully be respected. And because that's really the way democracy is best. And when we recognize diversity of thought, because diversity of thought is a strengthening mechanism. It's not a weakening. And, but it's only strengthening if we respect all the thoughts that are being brought forward in a respectful manner. And so I commend this commission for their attempts to try to address these issues in a meaningful way and to allow people to express their opinions.
Thank you.
Assembly Lackey, do you feel that we've made things easier for the ones that are doing the crimes? That
When you say we, who are you referring as we?
As an overall state, as far as consequences for them to do it. I see the trials and tribulations that Mr. Sherwood goes through as a district attorney, and the frustration at times and the work that he puts in, and all this other stuff that law enforcement does. Is it making it easier for them to do the crime?
Without question.
Yeah.
Yeah, without question that when there's less consequences, that's an incentive. At least it's not, when it's, you know that there's going to be negative consequences for your behavior, you're less likely to do it. That's human nature. That's behavior modification 101, right? That's a fact in all animals, including human beings. But yet it gets dismissed. Yeah. It gets dismissed by this study and this perspective. And I think that those are worth consideration, but they're not the end-all be-all to what drives human behavior. I think all of us in our soul know what drives human behavior, and it's not that complicated. Mm-hmm. If there's a penalty, we're less likely to do it. I'm not saying it eliminates it, and because it doesn't eliminate it, some people will say it has no effect, and that's not a balanced perspective. It's not real. And I can tell you through my life experience that human behavior is in large part predictable, in large part.
It seems to me that we've made things less consequential for individuals to do the crime. I mean, they seem to have an easier way out at times, and there's no consequences that are set forth. And so, the old saying is that if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. It seems like...
well, for example, let me just validate your point. When you have a part of the criminal justice process who fails to file charges on somebody because there's a political disagreement with what was done, that surely is an incentive to repeat that performance. Yeah. At the very least, it eliminates disincentive. And that's what's happening here. We actually have that occurring here in our midst, that we have cases where we have people that have been brought to the justice system that are no longer considered to be in that system, and charges are all dismissed and dropped completely. That's not a system that considers victims as equal partners.
Right. Well, somebody would appreciate everything you do.
It's an honor. It's an honor, and I consider it a great privilege, and I thank the people in this region for giving me this privilege, and I hope to be able to continue. That it?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next up we have Heather Varden with LA Homeless Service Authority. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the 2022 Greater Los Angeles Homeless Count presentation. My name is Heather Varden, the Service Planning Area 1 Community Relations Coordinator for LAHSA, or the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you today about the results of the 2022 homeless count. The homeless count is required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. As the lead agency in the Los Angeles Continuum of Care, LAHSA is charged with coordinating the point-in-time count for most of LA County. The LA Continuum of Care includes all of LA County except for Glendale, Long Beach, and Pasadena. These jurisdictions conduct separate counts and add their totals to the LA Continuum for the final county-wide number. This is a regional tool that is best utilized as a snapshot of the issue of Los Angeles County as a point in time, at a point in time, which helps us inform comprehensive policy and direct resources in response to the most emergent crisis of our time. It is important to lift up that people behind the numbers we are sharing with you this afternoon are neighbors, coworkers, employees, friends, and loved ones, a sentiment that we cannot lose sight of throughout this process. In LA County, we have one of the most robust, people-powered rehousing systems in the nation, and the people who make the system work are building a Los Angeles where everyone has a place to call home. In the last 5 years, these dedicated public service servants coordinated to end homelessness for over 84,000 Angelinos. Day in and day out, they are connecting our neighbors to care, recovery, and homes, and they are saving lives. Here's 2 stories of individuals who experienced homelessness and have found a place to call home. We'll begin with Pamela, who fell into homelessness while battling a disability and addiction. She was uplifted and made her way to housing through community support and a willingness to help others. She now works as a vocational case manager, helping others to stay housed and become self-sustained. Juliana was a runaway emancipated youth who escaped trauma. Today, she connects landlords and property managers in East Hollywood and the San Gabriel Valley with formerly unhoused residents who are rebuilding their lives through the supportive services that she and her team provide. Pamela and Juliana are a few of the people driving our rehousing system. Their stories are examples of the successes that are happening every day across LA County. We thank them for sharing their experience and look forward to continuing the work that will bring more tales of success across in days to come. We cannot deny that the pandemic has a profound effect on homelessness. Investments from our government partners made the rehousing system work better. In the early days of the pandemic, the federal, state, and local governments came together under a shared goal of placing as many of our COVID-vulnerable, unhoused neighbors into hotel rooms as part of Project Roomkey. As a shelter program that offered each individual their own room, Project Roomkey provided shelter to over 10,500 people, of which over 40% were placed into permanent housing. There's no mistake that the unprecedented shared vision and political will put forth during the pandemic shows that we can do what we can do to address this crisis together. Overall, the 2022 homeless count sheds light on what is working while also highlighting the problems that persist despite our coordinated efforts. As we dive into the numbers, we will lift up what is working and also highlight the challenges that remain. In the second half of the presentation, we will walk through how we overcome these challenges with some of the efforts that currently underway to address homelessness across LA County. This year, we estimate that 69,144 people are experiencing homelessness on any given night in LA County. That's a 4.1% increase from 2020. As a reminder, LAHSA did not conduct a homeless count in 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the city of Los Angeles, we estimate that 41,980 people experience homelessness on a given night, a 2% increase from 2021. Here's a look at homelessness spread throughout the region. Service Planning Area 1 is the Antelope Valley. We had a 3% decrease at 4,598 people experiencing homelessness on a given night. Last year, LAHSA and our community partners made 23,213 permanent housing placements. We have made over 84,000 placements in the past 5 years, which is enough to fill Dodger Stadium 1.5 times. However, the growth in the homelessness count tells us people are still falling into homelessness faster than our system can move them out. Due in large a large part of that is the fact that housing remains unaffordable for many Angelenos. There are some obvious exceptions. SPA 5 saw a 23% decrease in people experiencing homelessness, while SPA 6 and 8 saw significant increases. Antelope Valley, we saw a 3% decrease, which we think is pretty accurate. The last count in 2020, we saw a 40% increase. So that 3% decrease takes that into account. Across LA County, more people are in shelter than ever before, which is something to be celebrated. Shelter is necessary as a vital part of our system because bringing people inside protects them from the destructive effects of their health and safety that comes from experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We know the numbers we have talked about so far may surprise you and that it feels like the increase in homelessness should be larger than ever. The numbers from this year's homeless count are telling us that there was a 17% increase in tents, vehicles, and makeshift shelters on our streets and sidewalks from 2020. However, at the same time, LA County's unsheltered population only rose by 1%. For context, what we are seeing is a significant increase in the evidence of homelessness while not seeing a corresponding increase in our unsheltered neighbors. You may be wondering, how do we explain that? Well, during the early days of the pandemic, our communities followed CDC guidelines to prevent the spread of the virus by pausing encampment cleanups. This allowed our unsheltered neighbors to shelter in place while living outside. Without the cleanups, the number of tents, vehicles, and makeshift shelters increased by 10%. Meanwhile, our shelter options increased, as did the efforts to move people into them. As a result, more people moved inside to shelter, and some left tents and belongings behind in encampments. As the region began to reopen in the months since the homeless count in the city of LA, the county and independent cities have increased encampment cleanups, and most are using LAHSA's best practices to do it the right way. Before we move on, we need to note that our system is in a unique situation. During the pandemic, one-time federal pandemic assistance and policies helped keep people in their homes and expanded shelter. However, many of the policies and funding sources that made an impact are now ending, leaving households unsure if they will be able to keep their homes and less resources for the rehousing system to respond. Because homelessness is a lagging indicator, it's possible that the future homeless counts could show significant increases. Only time will tell what COVID-19's true effects on our neighbors on the edge of experiencing homelessness is. The winter Omicron variant spike led to fewer family and transitional aged youth surveys being collected. Additionally, as it was previously noted, COVID made it harder for the youth count and families this year, which made up about 10% of the count. The youth count was particularly challenging as many youth access centers were closed during the Omicron surge. This led to a lower number of surveys completed than in the previous years. While we were not able to fully see the impacts of the pandemic on our most vulnerable youth and families, we appreciate that homelessness is the tip of a much larger iceberg that far too many youth and families do not have a stable place to call home in LA County. This year's homeless count revealed that 39.5% of our unhoused neighbors report experiencing serious mental health or substance abuse, which is lower than the national average reported by HUD. This also means that 60.5% of our unhoused neighbors do not report experiencing a serious mental illness or substance abuse disorder. COVID exacerbated mental illnesses and substance use among the housed and unhoused alike. However, overdoses affected the unhoused drastically more. People experiencing homelessness are 35 times more likely to overdose than someone who is housed, with overdoses amongst LA's unhoused increasing by 80%. In 2021, driven by the rise of fentanyl use and economic dislocation. Everyone at LASA and our colleagues in every organization dedicated to address homelessness are heartbroken by the increased loss of life due to the substance abuse on our streets. Our community needs more resources dedicated to substance use disorder and mental health treatment to ensure that our most vulnerable neighbors have the opportunity to secure stable housing and thrive in our communities. As we turn our attention to race and ethnicity, we find that Black people remain overrepresented among our unhoused neighbors. Black people make up 30% of the unhoused, but are only 9% of the county's population. There is no doubt that past racist government policies and housing discrimination continue to have an impact on who and how many people experiencing homelessness in our county. The right to help right past wrongs, LASA is centering racial equity in all of our work, which is the only way we can overcome the prejudicial policies of the past. We at LASA encourage all of our partners to take steps necessary to ensure our policies and programs do everything they can to fix this massive imbalance. When we take a closer overall look at the racial demographics, we're also seeing a 25.8% more people experiencing homelessness identify as Latino. Latinos are amongst the largest demographic group in our region, representing 49% of LA County and now 44% of people experiencing homelessness. I think my slides got messed up. There's the Latino one. If there's one thing you take away from these results, I want you to see how policy and investments matter. Tenant protections like eviction moratoriums and rental assistance implemented by the county and city of LA helped people stay in their homes and not fall into homelessness. The county and cities across the region are expanding rent stabilization and tenant protections to ensure people continue to pay their rents and stay in their homes. Led by the City of LA and other cities across the county, our LA COC shelter capacity has increased 62% since 2019. We went from roughly 15,000 beds available on any given night in 2019 to over 25,000 beds in 2022. Shelter is not a long-term solution, but bringing our neighbors inside saves lives, and it places them on a path out of homelessness. We talked a little bit about this crisis, about how this crisis is the result of bad, often racially discriminated policies. I want to give some examples here from our national and local history. Things like policies that withheld wealth, land, and home ownership from people of color, mass incarceration, and inadequate support for people as they leave prisons, jails, or hospitals, or even foster care in the military. Over the years, local property owners led campaigns to slow down LA's housing supply. That increased their own wealth as housing prices skyrocketed and income stagnated, and the result was that it deprived thousands of people of affordable homes. People and policies created this crisis, and people and policies can end it. So as we consider what this year's homeless count data tells us, let's take the opportunity to make changes we need to successfully address homelessness in LA County. Focusing on the root causes of homelessness will show us how we can end the crisis. This is how we bring all of our unhoused neighbors home. LASA and our community partners are making big strategic policy changes right now. Our goal, to give you the short version, is to reduce unsheltered homelessness by moving people from shelter to housing faster. The pandemic allowed us to innovate with models like Project Room Key and Project Home Key. We are now applying those innovations and lessons learned to our entire rehousing system. Here are examples of what you can look for. Houston reduced homelessness by defining shared strategic goals across government entities and focusing on creating affordable housing. Strategic goals start with established metrics. We have a partnership with LA County, the City the city, and California Policy Lab to develop a set of shared metrics to track our progress. This is a critical step towards increasing coordination and accountability. And stay tuned, we're preparing to present those to the public in late September. Actually, be late December, my apologies there. The biggest factor driving homelessness is that housing is unaffordable for just about everyone. To fix this, we need to increase our housing supply across the county by adding more than 800,000 units over the next 8 years, and we desperately need more affordable housing. Policymakers at every level need to make significant policy changes if we're going to step up the pace of production. To do this, LA County is partnering with our 88 cities to increase affordable housing production. Cities have unique powers to site property. There's a lot that can be done to streamline the process of building and converting housing and to maximize the possible funding sources. We've provided a lot of information today about homelessness in LA County during the point in time count, so let's pull back and give you some takeaways. Homelessness is rising slower than it did in previous years. There are more tents and cars, etc., that indicate visible homelessness on the street, but there are actually fewer people occupying those cars and tents. Crucial policies and investments prevented COVID from making homelessness much, much worse. Investments in mental health and substance use disorder treatment services and beds are needed. We significantly increased the number of people in shelter, which saves lives and helps them exit homelessness. Black people are still overrepresented among people experiencing homelessness, but we did see a decrease in 2022. The number of Latinos experiencing homelessness has grown considerably over the last 2 years. With the economic support from the state and federal governments to address the effects of COVID-19 comes to an end, the LA area's low-income residents and rehousing systems are in a precarious position. As the pandemic era economic programs end, we will find out how many of our low-income residents are being pushed into homelessness. There's a significant amount of one-time funding for shelter that is ending. A loss of funding could cause a rise in unsheltered homelessness over the next few years. This year's homeless count gives us hope that collaboration, good policy decisions, and investment can make this crisis better. We'll only solve this together. And here's how you can help. You can advocate to support policies to create housing. You can say yes to housing in your community, and you can get involved with everyone by United Way. If you want to volunteer, there are many different ways. In LAHSA's Get Involved page can connect you with your local service provider. Many neighborhoods have self-organized groups like Neighbors for Neighbors LA, Hollywood Forward, and LA Can. You can vote for candidates and propositions that address the root causes of homelessness. If you are a property owner, you can help expand housing supply and create rental housing available to people experiencing homelessness, such as partnering with the lease-up programs. If you are an employer, you can hire formerly homeless applicants. And of course, we would love for you to help volunteer for the 2023 homeless count in January. You can sign up for that at theycountwillyou.org. People experiencing homelessness are our neighbors, parents, siblings, and our children. We all see rent rising. We have to work together to create a safety net and strong community for people who lose their homes. LAHSA is grateful for the tens of thousands of frontline staff and volunteers who work tirelessly every day to bring our unhoused neighbors home. Learn more about their stories at Rehousing LA. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I wanted to touch base or get your thoughts in terms of the timing of the count, because I noticed in most areas of the county, the count went up, yet we're reporting a reduction here. Given the timing of winter time, Project Room Key, things like that, there's concerns that it may have been undercounted in this area where the weather is much more severe than the rest of the county. Do you have any observations or input on that?
Yes, this year the count was postponed from January to February. It was an internal count due to safety reasons this year, so it should be very accurate. It was done by outreach workers, Lancaster public safety employees, Palmdale, City of Palmdale did their count, so it was an internal count. We're expecting that it is very accurate. If you look back to the 2020 numbers, that's when we saw a 41% increase, and that's when we believe it became more accurate, was in 2020. So the 3% decrease with Project Roomkey, we did have 2 Project Roomkey locations in the Antelope Valley that helped significantly in this area.
Are those continuing, or did those?
Those have ended.
Okay.
Yeah, but there was a 40% to permanent housing success rate with Project Roomkey. There is a Project Homekey that will be opening soon, but I don't know when that is with construction.
Is January the best time to count in the winter up here compared to the rest of the county? Doesn't that skew our results?
So our count is done during the day, which does help our count since we are the biggest geographical location. The methodology behind doing it in January is so that the numbers are actually accurate. More people will seek shelter when it's really cold, so we're counting everybody that's in shelters, and then people that are outside are absolutely homeless. You know, there's not really much of a question if people are outside at 6 a.m., you know, pushing a shopping cart. They're probably not walking to school.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions?
You did cite a statistic that surprised me, and it may be that I have a jaded point of view from the emergency department, but probably overwhelmingly the people that we see, and probably 10% of the population of the emergency department at any time are from the homeless population. But overwhelmingly, these are people that are involved in have mental health problems and methamphetamine abuse and alcohol abuse, all sort of mixed together in a toxic brew. Why do I have a very different impression of what the population includes?
Well, 34% of LA counties reported, it is a self-reported for mental illness and substance abuse, but that number is also 34% of almost 70,000 people is still a lot of people.
I think I raised that because finding a place to stay is only the beginning of the solution. In other words, if methamphetamine and alcohol abuse and mental health are really the driving forces for homelessness, methamphetamine, for example, very, very cheap and very easy to find, actually alters the brain chemistry and probably takes at least 6 months of sobriety before the brain can even recover and be in a position to start functioning more normally. So the approach to how you might deal with those kinds of chronic problems may be different than simply finding a place to stay.
Absolutely. Our outreach teams are out in the fields doing what is called progressive engagement. That's part of why it takes a little bit longer to get someone housed. Progressive engagement can start with just offering somebody a water bottle and trying to engage with that person and build that relationship in order to get the trust to get into rehab or into housing and then work on rehab and those types of things. So it is a long process. Usually you can't just say, hey, I have keys to an apartment, let's get you into a house. A lot of it is building that rapport, and the client has to be ready for things like substance abuse treatment. You're welcome.
And when does your Project Homekey start?
Project Homekey, I will find out when the local one is. It's being run by an agency called Hope of the Valley.
Okay.
And that one will be for families. It's going to be located on Sierra Highway.
And is that's taken over the Roomkey?
Project Roomkey has ended. That was a COVID response. So the Project Homekey is a long-term interim housing where they convert hotels or motels into a long-term stay. The idea is that it probably won't be necessarily permanent because it's not an ideal housing situation, but it is an interim approach to get people into their own apartments and houses from there.
Since that project is no longer running right now, do you expect a change in that 3%?
We are expecting to see it probably increase this coming year in January, since those programs have ended. And we don't, the eviction moratoriums were just lifted, so we're anticipating that we will be seeing more people falling into homelessness as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You mentioned some of the policies that, you mentioned Houston and others. Are we looking at other large states for policies that work? I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is half the homeless population in the entire country reside in California and New York. And when you say, we need to address policies and adopt policies that work, where else can we be looking that have addressed homelessness and better to reduce those numbers?
We are looking at some programs that Texas has been doing, as well as New Mexico, to kind of see what they're doing and if it would work in our environments as well.
Chairman, I have a question, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, sir.
How you doing, Heather?
Good.
Good. Hey, a quick question for you. I was wondering if you might be able to provide the commission with the Lancaster numbers, because I know, as I recall, we showed a pretty significant decrease in our city. Would you happen to have those numbers with you today?
I don't, but I can get them for you.
Okay. Maybe there's a way we can provide the commission with the specific Lancaster.
Specific Lancaster numbers, yeah. I
that'd be
can
great.
send you an email with those numbers. There's a dashboard where you can put it in by zip code, and I can send you that link, and you can see all of the areas. We did see a significant decrease in Lancaster, but an increase in the unincorporated areas. I know in the past there was some concern with funding, but the funding goes to the service planning area, so the funding for the area will be based off that 3%, the 3% decrease.
So the funding will be based on the 3%, and I guess they'll look at each city and base it on the 3. And
Usually, the funding goes to the service planning area. So most of the service providers in this area are for the entire SPA, even though there's specific programs that are within each of the cities.
Okay, thank you. And to the chair's point, I think the concern is that with our city showing such decreased numbers, we've got some doubt as to whether or not that's an accurate count. And I know with us mentioning the January time, that is concerning up here because it's extremely cold. So I just wanted to really point out that with our.
Well, we are looking again at doing another closed count this year, specifically so that people that are trained to look for, an example is people live literally underground out here, and a lot of the outreach teams work directly with those people so they know where to find them, as well as with the cities and the public safety teams and those types of things. So we'll probably be doing another closed count because of that in our area. It's better than having volunteers just go out and look, because they might not see something shiny on the ground and then realize it's solar panels and there's somebody living underground, where our outreach teams are trained for that and know where a lot of these people are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there, I'm sorry, is there some numbers that would identify the number of homeless people who are not United States citizens? And to the degree that those people come in contact with law enforcement, has there been any effort to finding them housing in their country of origin?
I can pull those numbers from our data team. That was a question that was asked in the demographic survey. There are several relocation programs available that do service this area. It's not just for people that are illegally in this country, but if we have someone who has family, say in New York, and they can go to New York and not be homeless, there's programs that will pay for a ticket to get them back to their family, as long as wherever they're going, they won't be homeless. And family is used very loosely. Friends, family, anyone that will take them in, and we can relocate them to not be homeless.
How are we doing on the equalizing the per capita funding between the spas?
I will have to follow up on that, and I can send an email on that.
Okay.
You know, it's going to be continuing to advocate like we have been doing to make sure that we get our fair share of funding in the Antelope Valley.
So, okay. Well, thank you very much. I just want to kind of conclude, you know, one thing I was, just looked some numbers up again. It's pretty staggering, and I think you hit it on the head with, policies cause these issues. And California, the 4 largest states in the country, California's homeless population is 161,000. New York, 90,000. Florida, 28,000. Texas, 27,000. So I think there are definitely examples of how to handle this better, because especially those numbers, the numbers in our state are just horrible, and how we're doing it without really addressing it is not compassionate. So and that's just a general commentary, but appreciate you and know you've been active in our community a long time working on this, face to face with people, and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay. If there's no objection, I know there's some time concerns. If we can jump ahead in the agenda to legislative reports. If there's no, actually, I apologize. First, we do need to, let's do the consent calendar first, and then get into reports. So, is there a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of August 10th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. Okay, roll call vote.
Commissioners Brown?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
McCracken? Yes. Vice Chair Little?
Yes.
Chairman Mercy?
Yes.
It passes unanimously.
Okay, moving on to commission staff presentations, updates, and reports. The LA County Sheriff's Department is unable to be here this morning. If there's no objection, I'd like to jump to item 7 for the legislative updates due to some just schedule concerns from those presenting. Hearing none, no objections, we'll go ahead and start. Ms. Jacqueline Owens from Congressman Garcia's office.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee. I want to do a brief update on the activities of the congressman since our last meeting. Forgive me, I need my glasses. So, Congressman in July signed on board with 123 other fellow Republicans in the House to send a letter to the Department of Justice, California Department of Justice, and Mr. Banta regarding the leak for sensitive information regarding the specifics for those who had a concealed carry permit. That leak was up for about 24 hours, and it went 10 years back. It included individuals' names, birth dates, driver's license, addresses, and as it was removed the next day, they did note that that information, that sensitive information, was downloaded. So they requested an investigation into that, very concerned about that and what it means for the residents. In July, there was a passage of the PAC Act, which allows the VA, the request was for the VA to improve health care for our veterans. This has been something the Congressman's fought a long time for and will continue to do so in the House. And then he put forward a bill, it's called the Military Spouse Relief Act, and this is pretty relevant for our community because we have a lot of, with Edwards Air Force Base, we have a lot of spouses who are relocated here. And when those spouse comes, they may have a credential or a license from another state. And it's very, very difficult for them to find a job here if they've got to get re-credentialed in California, if they're a doctor or teacher, nurse. So this act would allow our military spouses to be able to have reciprocity in whatever state they're relocated in. This is going to have a tremendous impact on the retention for our military, and as well as just helping the finances of those families, our military families who protect us every day. So he's very encouraged. That passed the Veterans Committee in the House with bipartisan support, and he's very, very hopeful that's going to move forward. There's been a very good response to that. And then in August, he was able to speak at the Reagan Library in the Reagan series, A Time for Change, or Time for Choosing. And this is just me, perhaps speaking sentimentally, but I think he hit it out of the park. He did a great job. And just continues to work hard. He's worked, and I know this is criminal justice, so just a brief overview. He's been able to get some legislation passed for transportation, infrastructure, and a number of other items on his agenda. But so briefly, I just want to say thank you for accommodating me. I apologize I have to leave early, but I do make myself available for any questions.
I do have a question regarding the CCW. Have your office had any complaints with people having problems with the information being released?
We've gotten calls on it, just as far as the residents or our constituents being upset that it occurred, but not that they were directly impacted by that.
Thank you.
No other questions? Thank you to the committee.
Thank you for being here.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Sean Cannon with Senator Wilk's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of repeating some of the same things that our illustrious assemblyman just did, the legislature adjourned the 2022 legislative session on September 1st of this year. There was, there were just under 4,500 bills introduced during this session, and just under 1,200 bills have reached the governor's desk this year. The governor had until September 30th to sign or veto any bills passed by the legislator. He signed 997 bills and vetoed 169 bills. The legislature will reconvene for the 2023-2024 legislative session on Monday, December 5th. During this fall interim, offices are now researching ideas for legislation for the upcoming session. So if you have any, please provide them to our office for consideration. Some bills of note here, starting with a bill that Assemblyman Lackey talked about, the Property Crimes Task Force, Assembly Bill 1653. Senator Wilk did support that bill, and he did vote for it. And relevant to public safety, Assembly Bill 2147, authored by Assemblyman Ting, which prohibits police officers from giving pedestrians tickets for jaywalking unless there is an immediate danger of collision or with a moving vehicle, and would make it legal to cross a street when not at a crosswalk or against the crosswalk sign, when it is not an immediate hazard to do so. Senator Wilk opposed this legislation because of the risk to public safety, as pedestrians may misjudge drivers, and drivers could be distracted. Pedestrians could stop or fall with a car coming closer. So that is a bill that the senator did oppose. And there are hundreds of noteworthy bills that were signed by the governor, and if you have any questions on specific bills, you may reach out to us and we will update you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Cannon? Okay, we'll resume the orders of the day. Presentation number 2, LA County Probation.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for recognizing Deputy Lynn, the unfortunate situation that occurred recently here in our community. We've tried to do our best to honor her as often and as much as possible, and it's been heart-wrenching, to say the least. But thank you. And thank you for stopping me at the fair. I thought it was a very kind gesture on your part, so I appreciate that, sir. A couple of things I want to share with you as we expand into what's going on in our community, some of the things that that were discussed earlier about laws and no bail and things of those natures, we've had to kind of expand our resources, if you will. One of the things we've done is we've created situations where we can be more effective, I guess, within the community and how we prepare the people that we're going to supervise that are getting released from prison. We've introduced in our region, finally, there was a pilot program in the Pomona area where we do video conferences before they get released. The purpose of that is that for the probation officer and the person they're going to supervise can get familiar with one another prior to release. So roughly around 30 to 35 days prior to release, you'll meet the person the client that's going to be removed from the prison system, and you'll get to meet them. So we continue to have a continuous path of who we supervise versus you're going to see this person, this person, this person, and then you'll get assigned a PO. So it's been in the making for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's finally come to light. So it's just a simple video conference, kind of a FaceTime type thing, if you will, to keep it simple. We contact corrections. Corrections gives us a handful of dates and times where we can communicate. We select one, the PO who is going to be assigned to. They'll launch it. They'll meet with the person that we're going to supervise, the probationer to be, and we kind of solidified the groundwork right off the bat versus having a little kind of a curvy path. The path is direct. And so we're hoping to see that be in effect. The reason why we were losing quite a bit of people, 5, 6, 7%, to release, never show up. We're hoping that this will narrow that into a smaller percentage of people that don't abscond and do show up, at least for their initial. So that's the thought process behind that. So we've introduced that. Talking about the homeless, I had I was part of the audience as she was speaking earlier. One of the things that we did, we all get issued county phones, and there was an article recently in the Antelope Valley Press regarding the WIN app, What I Need. So I had all the POs in my office downloaded on their county phones. And what it is it's just an app. And then if you hit the app, which I'm trying to do now, like 15 different things will come up where, actually it's 12, where they have shelters, crisis, food, legal, hotlines, transit, money issues, jobs, all based on homeless throughout the county, including this area. So you hit that little button on the thing that applies to you, and you might be able to tell someone where you can get a hot shower, a hot meal, and it's actually pretty helpful. So because 10 to 15% of our population we supervise are mental health challenged, homeless, transient, there are a small percentage that will call themselves transient or homeless based on the fact they want to play the cat and mouse game and not let them know where they're staying. But the ones that are actually truly homeless, you can tell when they walk in, they may need some food, some clothing. We have a little clothing donation center in our office that people bring in, and we help people get situated. The demand is more for female. So we try to seek donations for that, just for common things of daily life. For women, we get a lot more men's stuff, I would say, than women, especially in the hygienic part of it. So we can always use that. So we try to use some of those resources. We're able to obtain 100 tap cards, which is $7 to use the Metro busing system and stuff for transportation. So again, you start to hear that we're getting more and more resources out that we're utilizing to make what we do more efficient, and hopefully the more help we can give them in little bites, the more they'll respond to us that we're trying to help instead of just returning them back to prison as the thought process was back in the past, where you just hook them up, take them to jail, violate them for whatever. We're trying to have more resources to do that. Right now, currently, about 300 cases in Lancaster. That's about half of what we supervise in the Antelope Valley. We are trying to do things as best as possible. So we've had 20 successful terminations in the last 30 days, or 60 days since we last met. 11 violations were pending. We had 16 bench warrants issued. Sometimes, as they were talking earlier, somebody was speaking about the no bail. we may take somebody into custody on a no bail warrant. You know, they absconded, and they're going to get cited and released. That's frustrating. Knowing that they have completely absconded, and this is like the first time, this might be a historical thing that they've done for many, many, many times, and then they cite and release them based on some of the legal rules that have been implemented, and unfortunately, we don't always all agree with that. 6 months ago, I introduced you all to the mobile resource unit that we're utilizing in the community. 2 locations, Little Rock, Lake LA area, once a month in Lancaster. Then we also utilize it twice in the Pacoima, San Fernando Valley. Our numbers have decreased from a couple, 2 or 3 reporting. Actually, it's a mobile resource where they can report, speak to their PO, speak to a PO, and also get resources that, you know, whether it be housing and things of that nature out here. Still struggling with female housing out here. The only one we have available to our department is in Pomona. And so a lot of them refuse it, and they'll couch surf or they'll find some place to stay for a minute, because most people that want to stay up here have family up here, but they can't live with them for many reasons. But the mobile resource unit has increased to about 10 to 12 people checking in a 3-4 hour period, twice a month out in this area. We've relocated from the fairground area where we're hoping to catch the transient homeless people, more close central Lancaster toward where the Movies 12 is, over by Walmart on Valley Central Way. Big parking lot. We've spoken to security there. We're going to have RPOs there, a couple more armed and stuff. So the people that are showing up there are not there to cause any problem. They just want to report, get credit, and then anytime they can get resources, they'll use that. So it's been a good so far. We did, I think, twice, and the numbers have increased about people that are utilizing it. So we're not losing people when they come to report. So that's the purpose of it all. Last Wednesday on the 5th, we had a resource fair with Probation that was sponsored by Probation at the courthouse. It turned out to be successful, it appeared, just by the attendance of the community and the support of the community. A lot of good, we call them vendors, but a lot more resources. Mental health was there, other projects were there, and things of that nature. And the last thing I'll share with you today is we had one guy walk into our office 6 months ago. Like all people, we refer him to job opportunities, programs and stuff. And this gentleman, unfortunately, I can't give you his name, but this gentleman received scrolls from the County of LA for his input, his efforts. He was recognized by the Board of Supervisors in different programs because of his dedication, his commitment. He turned his life around. You know, and it was all based on just the resource that we had available to him, and he jumped on it. So now he has a union job. He had multiple opportunities to work at 2 or 3 different places that are good paying jobs. One of the things we do, we have auxiliary funds to help maybe initiate their union enrollment and dues and things of that nature. So, you know, we do have happy endings sometimes, so that's a good thing. And that's what we have for today. Any questions?
I just had a quick question. Out of the 300 cases, if I understood correctly, you said 11 violations and 16 bench warrants. What was the results of those?
The violations are still pending, so I'll kind of break it down to, it's really kind of, if you're not familiar with it. So there's 2 courts we handle. Post-release is what we do. That's the AB 109, the assembly bill from the state, which funds us. So we have a court in downtown LA, 2 courtrooms. So say that somebody gets a new charge, and say the DA decides to reject it. Not him. He wouldn't do that. But say that the attorney decides to reject it. We still have the opportunity to violate that person in court, in our court. It's a separate court. So if there's a new charge, say, and they say, okay, we didn't find enough sufficient evidence to file, or they chose not to file, we're still going to have a violation. And so we can utilize that. So those violations will be heard immediately within 10 days. We have the ability to put a no bail hold on them for 10 days, but we have to act within 10 days with our court. If there's a new filing in the Superior Court, it may take longer, but we have that 10 days to do the violation, and we can only ask for the maximum is 180 days. So they'll get 6 months. So even if it's a heinous crime, we're going to still violate, get the 6 months. The DA, obviously, if it's heinous, is going to file, and then they're going to take that case. And then if that person gets sentenced to state prison, then we'll close our case. But a lot of those warrants are absconding. A lot of those warrants are people just don't show up. They come once, they don't come at all. We give them a very, very short rope, I would say. Once they get out, they get 48 hours. You know, things can happen if they're coming from Corcoran and they get the bus ride down here and stuff, but they still have 48 hours to contact us, and that's not by phone, that's in person. If not, there's a red flag that pops up, we submit it to the court, and then they'll issue a warrant. Now, we can recall the warrant if they show up 2 or 3 days later saying, okay, they had a legitimate reason, whether it be transportation, illness, something like that. We can always ask the court to recall it, and that'll come through our court, which is the 2 courthouses down in LA County, down in downtown LA.
And what percentage is that versus just not showing up for some reason or another versus causing more issues?
Causing more issues are probably 10% are going to be new crimes. The other ones are going to be technical violations. You know, it's just hard sometimes because the good thing of it is we can violate somebody if we find enough evidence feeling that they're in violation because they have a variety of conditions. And it may be for the safety, you know, they're talking about victims' rights. If we have a victim that calls us and there's documentation, a lot of happens in domestic violence where the victim will call, the sheriffs will come out, they don't want an emergency restraining order, they don't want any of that stuff because they love that person or whatever their emotions are or whatever their feelings are. But we can still violate on that even if they don't, and we've done that recently. We had a young woman that was getting, the 3rd time he beat her up, and each time she wouldn't file a restraining order, each time she didn't want the emergency restraining order, and every time he ran off, so they had the police didn't, happen to catch him. But we caught up with him, and we took him into custody, and now they can use that time to file their case. Now that they have his whereabouts are known, now he's in custody. So we do have some flexibility, and the Sheriff's Department has been very helpful with us. So it's a good relationship, at least out here. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We're good. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Moving on, we don't have the Highway Patrol with us today, so Mr. Sherwood with the District Attorney's Office.
Good morning. Okay, so these are the cases filed by our office for the city of Lancaster for the month of August. I wasn't able to get September stats. So arson, we didn't file any arson cases. We only file about 1 every other month, so no issue there. Auto burglaries, we filed 19 felony auto burglary cases. The yearly average is a little over 12. Residential commercial burglaries, we filed 12 felony burglary cases. The average is 8. Criminal threats, we filed 2 felony criminal threat cases. Average is a little over 4. Drug sales, we filed 4. The average is 4. Domestic violence, we filed 22 felony domestic violence cases. The average is 7. So that's about a 300% increase. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, whether that's an aberration or an unfortunate trend. Felony evadings, we filed 4. The average is a little over 1. Felony assaults, excuse me, we filed 14. That's the average, 14. Felony DUIs, we didn't file any for the month of August. We only file approximately between 1 and 2 per month. Grand theft, ID theft, we filed 7. The average is 4. Illegal firearms, we filed 25 felony illegal firearms cases. The average is 15. Murders, attempted murders, we filed 3. The average is 2. Robberies, we filed 8. The average is 9. Sex crimes involving adults and or children, we filed 7. The average is 5. Vandalisms, we filed 6, and the average is 4. So those are the stats for August. Most of the crimes were higher for the month of August than our annual average. So,
Do you have a reason or a thought process on why that's the case?
Well, I think we've heard the thought. I think we've heard the reasons today. The domestic violence cases are a little concerning. Those are very, very difficult cases to prosecute. We used to issue body attachments for victims, but Our administration feels that that's re-victimizing the victim, so they're victimized by the perpetrator, and then we issue a warrant for their arrest because they don't show up for court. That's re-victimizing them. The flip side of that, though, is that we can't get the victims to come to court. 95% of those cases, the victims are uncooperative. The detectives, the sheriff's department's short-staffed, so they don't have the resources to really go out and track these people down. And when the victims don't show up for court, we can't prove the case, so those cases get dismissed. All that does is sort of enable the defendants to continue to commit these types of crimes, knowing that there's no consequences. So that's been an issue with domestic violence cases since I've been a prosecutor, so for 25 years. You know, but so it's always been a problem. The inability to issue body attachments, or even threaten to issue body attachments, is an issue. Whether that's impacting the number of cases, I'll take a look at it and see if we continue to see a rise. But in speaking with our prosecutors that are specially assigned, all they do is prosecute domestic violence cases and sexual assault cases. They've conveyed to me that it's making it difficult for them to prosecute these cases. So.
You mentioned the car burglary cases were up significantly. Is that catalytic converter theft, a lot of that, or is it other
no,
type of things?
those are actually different. Those are just those are your typical, car thefts. Car thefts they seem to have gone up a lot. I know we have the special catalytic converter task force. I do have a DA specially assigned to prosecute those cases, and they've been prosecuting them. The problem is, though, exactly what Congressman was saying, is there's no legislation specifically available to deal with those. And so they makes it difficult to prosecute them. They have one big catalytic converter case that involved not just the city of Lancaster, but other cities, a crew that was, there was a shooting involved, and people go out and confront the person stealing the catalytic converter, and they get shot at. So it's not just the stealing of the catalytic converter, it's the confrontations that sometimes occur when the people are caught in the act. So, I know. No good news, sorry.
Any other questions for Mr. Sherwood?
The cases on the catalytic converters that are being prosecuted, what's the penalty on some of these, I call shops that are doing it, and they happen to catch some of these individuals? What is the penalty?
So if it's vandalism, so it's the destruction of more than $950, the maximum is 3 years in state prison that is served in county jail under the AB 109 law. So I don't know how much time that's the maximum. Most people aren't getting that. And even if it's grand theft, so if we can show they stole, if we can actually, the problem is finding out who the actual victim is, right? So we've got a catalytic converter and a hacksaw in a car that stopped at night. We know it was stolen, but we don't know we don't know whose car it was stolen from, so we don't have a victim. We have a catalytic converter that was stolen from someone. So they're difficult to prove. I mean, we can prove it circumstantially that somebody probably didn't approve their catalytic converter being cut off in the middle of the night, but sometimes there's defenses that if we don't know where it came from, there's defenses that can be raised that makes it difficult to prosecute those cases. So the task force is really the best because they're getting the rings, and they're getting multiple catalytic converters, and they've got people that they work with that give them information, and then when they result in violent crimes like the one incident I was referring to, then we can get some substantial state prison time. But there's not a huge penalty for stealing a catalytic converter.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Just kind of separately highlight, I think it was about 6-8 weeks ago, the sheriffs in conjunction with AV Chevy did a catalytic converter etching. When you see those, help promote them. Put a little number. I think it took about 15 minutes. Was free, and really appreciate the public service on that.
If you want an update from the prosecutor that's handling those, I'm more than happy to either have her come down here and talk to you, answer your questions. She's really good and she's working with us, the sheriff
Yeah,
deputy, to
I-
give you an update and let you know what's going on
That
with
would be
those.
great, yeah, the next meeting or something, if she's available.
Yeah,
Would love to hear from her directly.
Yeah, she has a lot of thoughts, so she'll
Yeah.
tell it to you like it is.
Great.
Okay.
We appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. City Attorney update.
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to see everybody in person. It's been a long time. I don't have a lot specifically to talk about, but just want to kind of bring us up to speed. Now that we have our new director, thank goodness. It was a long time coming, but we got the right person, I think. So we've been working together, having a lot of conversation about what our enforcement options are for our various quality of life issues and other crimes. We've had a good meeting with Mr. Sherwood together to discuss our options there as well. And Rod, the director, and the code enforcement manager and I are trying to work much more closely as a team than we were able to do in the past. And I think that that's going to be very beneficial in terms of improving the appearance of the city and the quality of life issues around the city. So we'll have some more things coming to you in the next several months. I'm going to be resuming work on the rental housing business license update and also adding provisions concerning short-term rentals like the Airbnbs. We are having some issues with Airbnbs, and so I'll want to get your input. We might want to have that break-off committee again so we can have some further conversation with other shareholders in those discussions before we finalize that ordinance. I think having partnership on that is our best bet for cooperation and compliance moving forward. So that's probably the first thing I'll want to work on with some of you separately, and I'm looking forward to that. And that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, I'm glad to see Jonathan back. Yeah, really missed you, So glad to see your shining face, absolutely.
Okay. Well, last but not least, it's a pleasure to welcome our new Public Safety Director, Rod Armelin.
So these legs have a 30-minute must stand rule, so when you're that tall. So it's good to see all of you today. And I too want to say it's wonderful with what we're trying to do over there with public safety and get us all working together. And as I mentioned in the previous meeting, identifying root causes and then addressing those so that hopefully we cure the ill out there and make things better. So just wanted to pass on a few things to you folks today. I briefly mentioned, well, first, you know what? I'm sorry, I wanted to commend your department. I wasn't able to attend Probation Officer Lynn's services, but I did talk to Captain Lecravain and other friends from the Sheriff's Department I worked with, and you guys put on a wonderful, wonderful presentation to her and her family. So thank you for doing that. So last time we were here, I briefly mentioned that we were identifying locations that we were going to try and go after, for lack of a better term, find out what the root causes and problems are. And we had selected Jane Reynolds Park as an initial. Now, please keep in mind, we're working with the resources that we have. And as mentioned earlier, in some areas, we don't have all the pieces yet. And the Sheriff's Department, which is helping us greatly, are down in some of the pieces they need as well. But that's no reason for us not to start in dealing with some of the issues. So Jane Reynolds, we started on this probably about a month ago, I guess. And I just wanted to give you some things that we're doing over there. So we wasted no time and got a community survey going. And I'm happy to tell you, we got about 300 responses from the community members around the park, which is really good. And just about all of them kind of pointed out some concerns about safety at the park. And many saying, I'm not taking my family there because of safety at the park. I had mentioned before, that park, what astonished me, besides some of the issues that are going on, was to find out that I think it's around $240,000 for maintenance costs for the previous year, and all but 10% of that went towards graffiti, vandalism, destruction of property. So definitely needs our attention. So those surveys were done, and that kind of gave us an idea, because we got information back from the community on how we were going to go in and things we were going to do. We also did a door-to-door already. So we got with the Sheriff's Department and Public Safety, and we actually knocked on doors probably 2 or 3 blocks over from the park, and ensured that they knew what we were going to do. And I actually took the time to offer services that we have within the city. A lot of folks were unaware of that, so it was good to do that face-to-face connection out there with them, and also try and generate some interest in block clubs. And we got some really good feedback, so we're working towards that. Sheriff's Department has been extremely proactive. In fact, they actually prevented a drive-by shooting that was going to happen at the park and arrested 2 individuals. They were actually there just doing general service at the park, because we asked them to constantly go by, because there is some drug activity and other things. We found needles in the children's playground area. So they were giving the park attention that day and stopped a drive-by shooting and recovered an assault weapon, some drugs, and I believe a second weapon. So they've been really good about getting over there, and we're going to continue that effort with them. And I just wanted to tell you, we have plans. Part of our overall plan is, once we kind of identify the individuals and activities that cannot be at one of our public parks and address those, the next plan is to get the community back in. And that's some of the talk we had during the door-to-door. But we've already started working on that. MOA has a community engagement artist. And these are 2 artists that I guess MOA partners with, that come in and look at what they can do in areas around the city. So we've already met with this individual. We're going to have additional meetings involving parks and come up with programs and beautification for that park. So we're going to keep you up to date on that. That's our initial location. We're going to hit several more around this city. Then I wanted to let you know about our public safety training. One of the things I noticed when I came in is that there's quite a bit of training that we need to provide to our public safety personnel, because they're out there doing contact with the community, and there's certain things they need to know. So I just wanted to give you a couple other things that we've given them. It's extensive, and we're actually developing a training program for our public safety department, and we're going to require individuals to have all of this training. But just a few that you should know about. We've given them trauma-informed care, and this is basically giving them the experience and knowledge to identify individuals who have suffered trauma, and then to have a be culturally mindful of that trauma and how it affects persons. And we're not really talking physical, as I'm sure you understand. We're talking about individuals who've suffered some type of loss or had some type of illness or mental health. So we've got them into that. Public health training, we've given them some of that so they can identify health concerns out there in the community and with individuals. We've also given them implicit bias. So, and I think that was very much needed, especially for when you consider a lot of our contacts are somewhat on a law enforcement level. We're not stopping and detaining, but we are having deep conversation with folks, and quite often it's about concerns at their properties or with things they're dealing with in the community. And cultural humility, we've given them that, and then we're really excited. We're going to have a Dr. Maria Martinez, and she's kind of a nationally recognized individual. At least I will say she's recognized within this state. Works for the Department of Mental Health. I worked with her a lot when I was with the Sheriff's Department. She's going to come in and do a de-escalation and threat assessment training, because we want our folks to be able to identify if they are dealing with a threat or if there's a threat out there, and then have the skills to de-escalate and hopefully prevent it from turning into something that we don't want. So there's much more training coming for the department. And like I said, we're developing a training program because we need to have that documented and ensure that we regularly take it. And then I just wanted to tell you about a couple of events that are coming up. We're going to have the Haunt at the Hangar, October 22nd, Halloween event, kids and families, a lot to do. So we're hoping and encouraging families to come out and enjoy that. And then the Field of Drafts will be November 7th as well. So Haunt at the Hangar, 4 to 8 p.m., and the Field of Drafts is 1 to 5 p.m. And then one last thing, I've been working with Deputy Green and talking about developing our own Citizens Academy. And I don't know if any of you have been through one of those yet, but certainly when we get it developed, we're going to encourage all of you to attend. And basically what it is we're going to abbreviate it because the Sheriff's Department does one, and it's about 8 weeks. We're going to cut it down to, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Identify, and it's one night a week, but identify the essential things about law enforcement and about public safety that would be good for citizens to know. And so once we get that set together, and I'm hoping we can get our first class done by the end of the year, we're going to certainly invite you folks and ask that you attend if you can dedicate that time. So that's really all I have today, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I did have one question. I don't know if this is the right format for this or not, but a couple weeks ago, had a good family friend that was killed in a car accident out on 60th and F. And in traveling out there, what has to happen to have a traffic light or lighting out there? Because it was completely dark. And it would be very helpful if the stop signs were lit up out there. And that was like the second death inside of a 2-week period. And I know there's a lot of accidents out there. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you or your staff could pursue as far as putting lighting on the stop signs out there?
Certainly we can look into that. What usually happens is we'll end up doing some type of survey. A survey is conducted, and they determine whether or not a stop sign, a stoplight, additional lighting needs to happen. So we can do that for that intersection. I'll share with you that traffic safety is a big concern of mine and all of public safety. Our city has had quite a few accidents, and unfortunately quite a few fatalities have occurred. I'm trying to recall, but I think we're somewhere in the area of 5 or 6 motorcycle fatalities so far this year. I haven't had the opportunity to look at the comparison of the numbers to last year. It's interesting you bring it up because I do have a quarterly traffic safety meeting with the LA County Sheriff's Department traffic investigators. I believe that's tomorrow. So, and I plan on asking them about traffic safety and what we can do as a team, but especially what they're doing in the area of enforcement, because that is probably the biggest thing when it comes to preventing traffic collisions, having individuals understand, like Mr. Lackey said, that there's repercussions out there if you're driving inappropriately. I think speeding is a problem in our community.
Right, and my hope would be that we could at least get the stop signs lit. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. If I can speak with you afterwards, I wanted to get that location again from you, or maybe you can just, because I don't have my pen.
I think it was 60th West and Avenue F.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It happened, I think, Friday night at the fair.
Okay.
Well, first I want to say thanks for the extra enforcement attention to Jane Reynolds Park. I know the city's put a lot of investment in there with the skate park and want to have it as a safe place for kids. The only thing I'd add, I had gotten a direct concern from the owner of the building just to the east of the park, that he's had to deal with a large increase in graffiti in recent months, and the difficulty in abating that and looking for any assistance for those neighbors in addressing those problems, just clean up and all that. And then I'd touch on a couple of things that we've talked about before you joined the city. We had formed some ad hoc committees to look at different issues. Some of which are pretty high profile, the illegal cannabis. Others are dealing with real estate trespass and other issues. I'm trying to remember all the ones we formed. One was, I think it's going to be involved with the hybrid model in terms of some of those misdemeanor issues that the elected district attorney's policies are not addressing, but how we can, if the ways that we as a local government can look at some of those issues to address those misdemeanor crimes. So things like that, and we've kind of been holding them for you. So, but very excited to be working with you and look forward to moving on those.
That's great, sir. Thank you. Very excited to be here. This is a great city. It really is. And I'd love to get that information. One last thing I'll share with you is last week I went to Chicago and met with Chicago Police Department. And while they don't have a hybrid program, they're using a different type of, I guess, community engagement efforts to deal with root causes. So we went out and we took a look at it. It's the COPS program on steroids is how it was put to me. And they have a great way of addressing many of the issues you just spoke about. So we're going to take a look at what they have that we might want to bring over here. And I'd love to get that ad hoc committee information. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I can just chime in, I meant for us to bring up what Mr. Sherwood and the director and I spoke about a few weeks ago about what's happening in the court in Department A16. It's the drug court and the mental health court. Maybe, Mr. Sherwood, you can talk just briefly about it. And we were thinking that it might be a good idea to take a field trip over there and go see what that court looks like in action.
Yeah, I've mentioned it a few times before. We have a court in the Antelope Valley Courthouse that's unique, I think, to Los Angeles County. I'm not aware of any other facility similar in the county and maybe in the country. And I direct a lot of cases in there for people that generally they're facing prison time, but they have either mental health issues, drug issues, or in most cases it's a combination. And they have a really good system over there. We have a great judge, we have a great prosecutor, and we have really good, actually, defense attorneys who understand the purpose of this particular program. And invariably, they start out with a program called START with the Sheriff's Department, where they are in custody. It's an in-custody program. They're there for, it takes a while to get in, sometimes 6 to 8 weeks, and then the program's 6 to 8 weeks long. And I think that does help with the 180 days to kind of clean the methamphetamine out of your system that a lot of times it takes before they're then transitioned into intensive inpatient treatment. They're there for anywhere from 6 months to a year. There's a few good programs, Salvation Army, Project 180 are some good programs. If they're able to get through that, then they go into outpatient and then eventually graduate. I've been to a couple of the graduations. They're actually very emotional. I've seen a lot of people's lives change. I'm not going to tell you it's 100%, and I'd be surprised if it's more than 50%. But there's a lot of people that go through that program that are looking at substantial prison time that change their lives. And I haven't seen anything like it in my 25 years in terms of its effectiveness of dealing with people with, mental health and or drug treatment programs. So I was just mentioning it when we met, and I've been trying to encourage people.
Even a 40 or 50% is a huge impact considering recidivism rates.
I know. When I say that, I'm always like, that doesn't sound very high, but we have some. Yeah, we have some other programs over there that are, I think, 2 or 3%, and we're putting millions of dollars into that program. We have a pilot program here in the Antelope Valley, and they're trying to say it's a success. My stats aren't bearing that out. But this program is, and you can talk to the public defender over there that runs it, my DA who's done a really good job, and the judge, the probation officer, and the other individual over there that coordinates the mental health aspect. they do just a phenomenal job, and I really think it's a good program, and if anybody's interested in learning about it, I would highly encourage you to come over and check it out.
I think that'd be a great
I
thing
think
to
it'd be a
do.
great thing, too.
Yeah.
I really do. Yeah, I would be very much interested in that.
Great, thank you. Okay, public business from the floor, non-agendized items.
This is the time to address the Lancaster Criminal Justice Commission on non-agendized matters. Speaker cards can be found on the back table of the council chambers. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each unless a different time limit is announced. State law prohibits the commission from taking action on items not on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 speaker cards. Is David Paul still here, or did he leave? Looks like he left. Okay, Anita Boardlamay.
Hello, my name is Anita Boardlamay. I was here last month. Sorry I get nervous in front of you guys because you just seem higher than me, physically too. I'm here to address organized crime in the court system. I was illegally prosecuted after my daughter was kidnapped by a retired judge's relative who is a registered sex offender. I was threatened that if I did not let them use my daughter in human trafficking, that they would use a judge in LA County to prosecute me. I came to Rex Paris in City Hall a few years before that in 2014 because there were other issues going on, and one of them was federal crime by a company called Valterra Products and organized crime. They stole my name, our identity. Me and my children are eyewitnesses. I reported my daughter missing. The missing persons department at the time, Melissa Dorsey, told me that I got what I deserved and that I better leave it alone too. I've been threatened. My neighbors that were involved in criminally setting me up are still trying to prosecute me again, telling me if I don't shut my mouth, telling me I didn't get it the first time. They arrested me for assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. No state's evidence after he came to my property, after he broke my camera. All of my evidence was stolen in the case. Then I reported the judge. And I mean, the state's evidence goes on and on and on. I know nobody wants to hear this. Everybody keeps trying to shut me up. This is my problem. Last year, they called the sheriff's on me again. This guy, they're mocking the law. The problem with me is, unfortunately, this really is organized crime. And I laughed at it for years thinking this is a joke. One of the judges involved is Gorbachev, Stefan, and I'm great. I love listening to these meetings because you learn so much, and I'm really sorry that, unfortunately, that there's a small percentage of people being illegally prosecuted. I've always obeyed the law. When I was young, I did things, but I've always obeyed the law. I'm not a violent person, and I was told that if I didn't shut up about organized crime and what they did to my daughter was in jail, and none of the officers are denying that she was in jail illegally the whole time because they didn't use her legal name. She has a criminal record because they wanted to sue. I've had my business stolen by the same man from Valterra Products, and the business is Hidden Hype Clothing Line. So this guy recommended that I make a meeting to turn in the state's evidence I have. There are murders involved in this. No one wants to believe me that go back to Linwood, that my daughter was forced to witness a sodomizing murder of a young person. I mean, come on, you guys. You know that organized crime does exist and that people are illegally prosecuted. What are we doing to protect the real innocent, too?
Commissioner comments. Commissioner Brown? Commissioner Harris?
No comment.
Commissioner Little, Vice Chair Little?
Welcome, Nicole. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to see her on board, so, awesome. And glad to see Austin back. You know, now I can call her all the time again like I used to.
Commissioner
No
McCracken?
comment. Thank you.
Nope. And I just conclude by, again, welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, having reached the end of our agenda, if there's no objection, we will adjourn to our next regular meeting, Wednesday, November 9th, 2022 at 10 a.m.